Twitch ads are working. If you're wondering, Twitch ads are working, Twitch ads are.
For life. Keep your internet service monthly rate for as long as you keep your plan. Internet service monthly rate subject to continued plan.
Test. Yes. I'm just coming through just fine. Green. See, it's going through Zoom call, room, to my laptop. You have to say it with reverence. Jay, what do you do? You're not here.
Architecture,
You're not here doing cool stuff like this.
software architecture,
Right.
Jasper engines.
Okay. That's why you're saying the Jasper reading.
Yeah.
That's fun. They here in Louisville?
No. Jasper, yeah.
Okay.
So, you know where Santa Claus is?
North Pole. I do, yes.
So same exit, but go the other way.
So go north or go south? Up to-
Well, I just know when you get off the exit, you go left to get to Santa Claus Land, you go right to eventually Jasper, about 12 miles.
Gotcha. Well, I've got the chat pulled up. And how long roughly is your content?
About an hour 18.
Okay. Well, I'd say let's start at 6, pretty close. Either in they can. We usually have a couple of Humana people who attend virtually. Mr. Waddell asserts that he'll be attending virtually. Says, but I'm not sure he trusted that guy. And where he was at, but Utah. He was billed last week. It's toyed around with the idea. Doing a bill recap. Which I think would be a good talk.
Messages, no one last minute can't find it.
Yeah. Daniel has a placard sign. You call it a washboard sign over there. But he didn't leave it, so it's usually sitting out there. I've never heard anyone say, "Oh, I was lost until I saw the sign," so I don't know how much help it is, but we definitely have had. So we do an AWS meetup here too, and people inevitably show up at the address, which is 6 Main Street or whatever it is. And as a result, don't know how to get the building because you can't get in on it.
It's also who did RSVP. I see she's changed her RSVP, so I'm surprised she's not here.
Who's that?
Marissa.
Okay, that's not her name on it. If you're ready to get started, I don't know if there's anybody watching, but I know these are recorded, so thank you, Chad, for coming out to the Azure Meetup group here in Louisville and doing this talk. We're looking forward to it. I know several people here at Humana have they're right there. Yeah, they'll be all up in your dome. The several people here at Humana have been very interested in this topic as they saw it on the schedule. So cool. Take it away.
All right. Wow. Well, thank you everyone for coming. But yeah, we'll make this work. I will say the one interest part is the first time I'm doing the talk, and I just realized I can't see my slides, which means I can't see my presenter mode. But we'll make it work. So I don't know exactly what my next slide is. So
Gotcha.
we'll see. All right. So yes, I'm mute. That's good. No, my computer's telling me I'm muted. I'm like, that's a good thing.
That's what we want.
All right. So for those who have not met me before, hey, how's it going?
Hey, sir.
Hey.
Come on over. We're just getting started. As is true Humana Azure Meetup group fashion. No one's here at 6 o'clock. It's just kind of 6:15. We'll maybe have
That's a little thing, right? No one ever shows up.
Could be a little bit. That's right.
Yes, the parking and all, right? So
Yeah. I always get down here early just to avoid getting delayed by the parking mess.
I thought I was late, so it's not. I just came from.
Let's see, who do we got? We have a chatter here. Beefy Dog 9000 says hi all.
Right. All right. So for those who haven't met before, my name is Jay Green. I am the senior software architect at Jasper Engines. You can probably figure out what we make. Actually, well, we remanufacture engines, so it's an interesting situation there. And there's all my contact information. Definitely feel free to reach out. All right. So the one thing I did want to do first, so I actually first became part of the Azure Meetup like 4 or 5 years ago, and started helping out with the original people who started the group. Then the pandemic happened, and then we had the meetup a couple times during the pandemic, and no one was showing up, and so we decided not to continue it. And sure enough, last year was a crazy year. Ask me later, but last year was not the best year whatsoever. But I was trying to get the group back going, and then sure enough, the annual post up, hey, I want to start an Azure group. I'm like, hey, I want to get this group started back up. So I definitely want to. Funny part is, this is now 6 months. This group has been going, and this is the first time I've actually made it here because I've always been traveling. I don't travel that much, but this one has seemed to have always been the day that I'm not in town. Sure. So definitely want to thank those guys. Sure enough, I do also run the Louisville.net meetup. So I'm going to plug that because I can. So next week we have Mike Eaton come down and talk about Spectre Console, which is a really nice library for building console applications. In July, we've got David Yard coming in. He's going to talk about AI.
What is AI? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, well, and because we can't get enough AI, in August, we're also going to talk about AI. And actually it's not, well, it is part of the season of AI, which is Microsoft's doing. It's, I forgot the title of the talk. I'm the one doing the talk, but I'm doing, Microsoft's giving me all the content and I just talk. Sure. So definitely check those out. Some upcoming events that are within driving distance. At the end of this month, we've got the Senior City Summit. That's a really nice smaller event, which gives you great access to the speakers. Saints Deliver will be next month. And the great thing about Saints Deliver is not just for developers. It is the whole idea of delivering software instantly. So it's a great event. I'm a little bit biased because I help run that event, but I just help. Guy who really does an awesome job. And then DevUp is St. Charles, which is right next to St. Louis. That's a bigger event. And sure enough, I'll actually be doing all the workshop on building serverless applications. So, and then sure enough, I always like to say, join me. Like I say, I do get around. Of all these events, if you're going to try to follow me somewhere, the two at the bottom are co-located. So APA Con and Serverless Con, and that is in Berlin. So that's the one to come. If you're going to join me there, right? But yeah, so I do get around. All right. So we're gonna talk about Azure Functions and serverless. And I thought what I quickly do is do a quick prelude into what we're talking about there. So of the two in the room, have either one of you dealt with Azure Functions?
Yes.
It's been a while, but yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a little bit of a prelude to, kind of get you back on track, right? As you see, I talk like serverless console. Serverless is my thing, right? Or one of my things. And one of the things I always like to explain with serverless is, looking at the evolution of application platforms. My blonde hair hides my gray, which is awesome, but there is quite a bit of gray in there. So I actually remember the days of where on-prem was the thing. Funny thing is, I'm a Jasper Engines. Guess what? We have a lot of on-prem. We're trying to move to the cloud. But think about what we had to do, right? You got your hardware. You would get your operating systems, figure out what that was, and figure out how to get that installed. You would get your gotta move the Zoom, and it's driving me crazy. I mean, it's just sitting there, but it's driving me crazy. You got your frameworks, and figuring out what frameworks and what versions you needed. And somehow you got this all connected to the cloud, right? And if you're lucky, that didn't cause you, lots of heartburn. But the thing was, we weren't done, right? I mean, even after all this work, and this usually took months, there were a lot of questions we had to ask, right? Or answer, So how are we going to do backups? How are we going to do security, right? Both physical and, network security. How are we going to, how are we going to scale our applications? What do we do for monitoring? Lots of questions that have nothing to do with the application. I mean, they have to do with keeping the application running, but this isn't, a business problem, all right? So lots of things we had to do. So the cloud comes up, and sure enough, what we call the cloud is kind of funny because really the cloud started in the 60s. Ross Perot, anyone remember Ross Perot with big old ears? He's actually really the real start of the cloud.
Was it Al Gore? That did it?
Well, funny thing, so Ross Perot, he's an interesting character, right? So I actually used to work for EBS, so I got to learn a lot about Ross Perot. So he was an IBM sales guy, and he was selling these mainframes, and he realized, mainframes were being used at night. So he was like, "Hey, I'll help you get a better price in this if you let me use these at night." And so he was selling the services at night for other companies to use, so they got basically fractional uses. But anyway, back to what we're talking about here. We get to the cloud, and cloud really started as infrastructure as a service. The whole idea, hey, I can get you this virtual machine, and you can run with it, and this was great, right? Because it definitely helped a lot. But the thing is we still have all the questions. The only thing is the cloud vendors were really good about organizing those questions, so it did make it easier. But still, me as a software developer and architect, this isn't, that's not my stuff, right? That's not software architecture, right? That's enterprise architecture stuff, more than what we want to deal with. Move along, you get platform as a service. And sure enough, this is where Azure started to take off, really. I mean, Azure did start with IaaS, but it was platform as a service is where, Microsoft proved its weight, all right? And platform as a service, I mean, the idea of now, I don't worry about the virtual machine side of it. I just worry about a service, right? So I want a web app. So I have that web app service, right? That's a prime example. And the great part is it took care of a lot of questions. But there's some really important questions like scaling. And while platform service made it easier, I still had to make a lot of decisions, and usually very costly decisions, because we usually didn't get it right. One way or the other. We either under provisioned, and so all of a sudden, people couldn't get our site, or we paid for way too much for most of the year. All right. Well, that's where serverless comes in. All right. So serverless, I don't have to worry about the operating system. I don't have to worry about the frameworks. I don't even worry about any of these questions, right? Because everything's taken care of. All I worry about is my code. Write my piece of code, get it out there, and then let the cloud deal with it all. Of course, now the name serverless is a little bit stupid because, of course, there are servers, right? I mean, but the thing is you can just think about servers less, and that's really where this name comes from. So you're not worried about server configuration, you're not worried about server scaling, you're just worried about running your code. Now, when we talk about serverless architecture, basically two different types of architecture. You have function as a service. which is what we normally think about when we talk about service, right? You know, the idea that I have a piece of code that I need to be triggered off of some type of action. You know, and sure enough, I mean, Microsoft is really good with names, right? Their functions of service is called functions, right? I mean, you know, Microsoft's very clever with names, right? You know, and I'm joking a little bit here. But you know, and then but you also have backends of service, and this is just more for information. It's not really what we're talking about tonight. But think about like your databases, right? Although there's also the term of databases and service, but you know, but here where I'm getting a little bit more than just a platform as a service, but I'm also still, I'm not managing the server, and it does come up and come down when I need it to, and so forth. All right, so function of service, there are 5 main tenets. And the first one is that it's event driven. Although as someone who talks a lot about event driven architecture, I like to say it's really more trigger driven. And the idea that some type of trigger happens, whether it's a record gets added to a database, a message gets added to a queue, any of these type of things that happen, and then we fire off some code. Next is that they're short-lived. And by short-lived, I really do mean it really should be a couple seconds. I mean, you can have longer things and so forth, but the idea is they're short-lived. And more importantly, there's no state. So we don't remember what happened next time. And they should be ephemeral. We should be able to call them over and over, and those, you know, it's consistent. And then automatic scaling, right? And of course, this is the one that everyone loves with when we talk about function service. The idea that, you know, when my customer demand picks up, I can scale up, and when it goes back down. For example, so Jaffa engines, right? We are a 1-shift organization, right? We, you know, and so are our customers, right? Our customers are auto shops. So guess what? They're not open at night either. So, you know, we don't need to be paying for servers at night because no one's using them, right? And that's a great part, right? Because it automatically scales those up. And then you get that pay per execution. Now, I will say, like even with Azure Functions, not everything's pay per execution. There are some, you know, different services, but you know, generally we're talking about a pay per execution, pay what you're using. And then finally, we've got this abstraction of infrastructure. So again, the idea, I don't worry about the infrastructure. I let, you know, Microsoft or AWS or whatever handle that. All right. Now, so Azure service, what do we have in Azure? Well, there's actually quite a bit. So first, we've got the obvious side, the compute. All right, so we have the Azure Functions and the container apps. Those are pure serverless type services. Again, like I was joking, the functions of the service is called functions. All right, the container apps, that's really cool. I mean, it's basically serverless containers. It was interesting when that was first coming out, before it was even publicly announced. I was attending a call, and you know, Microsoft was introducing this. And you know, one of the things they talked about is like Kubernetes is hard. And they were given a stat, I don't remember the stat, but it was a very high percentage of projects never even get close to succeeding, let succeed. And that's part of the reason why they came with the Azure container apps, because most apps are really simple, but you know, Kubernetes and such is so hard.
Is that what's called Azure ACS before Azure Container Service? I remember like in 2018 when they had
ACS is something different.
okay.
Yeah. And I gotta admit, I never used it. I never really I'm still not that much into containers. We're doing containers with Jasper, and I've been with Jasper for 6 months, so I'm, you know, I picked up in the middle of a project, but container apps are really interesting. Moving to other types of services, you got your workflow integration, so your API management, your logic apps, your event grid, you know, so these type of services. Data processing. So interesting one, like the stream analytics. That's actually a really cool tool if you need to do like real-time analytics, because it can process super fast and do things. But the cool part is I literally just say, here, I need this, and then okay, here's your data source. I don't even have to set it up in that, right? Again, some of the ideas here, lots of messaging type things, you know. Here's where, you know, me as an event-driven person, this is where I live my world in, right? You know, service bus, event hubs. I know Microsoft lists Azure Relays as you know, serverless. I would not call it serverless because I didn't even know what Relay was until earlier this year. Basically, it's Microsoft's secret tool to get you on-prem and then connect back into the cloud. I did get to meet the architect of it, and that was a really interesting conversation. But I think this is finally you got your data storage, right? And again, like one of the interesting things, you know, like I said, you can scale these databases all the way down. So when you're not using them, you're not paying for them. So I worked for a company a while back, and you know, one of the issues we had was, you know, we did monthly deployments, and every month something failed with the deployment. And it just boiled down to because we had a test environment, we were doing full testing, but you know, we were doing patches to that as we went along. But then we tried to do a full upgrade, and there was always something that we missed. And so we actually stood up a staging environment. And then we wanted it to match production. Our production database, now I'm a Humana, this means nothing to Humana, but our production database was like $14,000 a month. That was a lot of money to us, right? You know, we obviously didn't want to pay another $14,000 a month, you know, to just do a staging database. Well, we were able to do serverless, and you know, it cost us, you know, a couple $100, which, considering that we no longer, I mean, we got rid of all those production problems, you know, that definitely saved the company a ton of money. All right, so Azure Functions. So the whole idea, you take your code, you take your events and your data, and you put them together. And so that's, and hence the logo. It was so cool. The first time I saw Microsoft do that animation, I'm like, oh, I have to steal that because I never realized that's where the logo came, how the logo came to be. But yeah, so Azure Functions, what are we talking about? Well, one, some great benefits, right? So choice of language. So I mean, you got the obvious, you know, C#, F#, you know, JavaScript is pretty obvious, but you know, things like Java, Python, you know, whatever you need to work on, not whatever, you know, there's only so many languages they support, but you know,
Classic ASP.
no classic ASP, no. And actually even .NET Framework is, I think that support's finally gone. Yeah. If it's not gone yet, it's gone next year for sure. I can't remember, but I know for sure it will definitely be gone after next year. So lots of support there. The whole idea of bring your own dependencies. Sure enough, this is not a best practice type talk, but one of my best practices with Azure Functions is don't write your code in Azure Function, write it in a package, and then bring that in, because you can't really unit test an Azure Function, but you can unit test a package. Right? So you got that ability. One of the big things, and this is where Microsoft does a whole lot better than like AWS, is the integrations. So whether, you know, I need to respond to something happening in the Cosmos database, a service bus, event hubs, all these different type of actions that, you know, things happen and I can take actions with it. But the great part is not just Azure services, right? So RabbitMQ, GitHub, and yes, GitHub's owned by Microsoft, but that's been in the slice longer than that has been true. Twilio, right? But you know, so also third-party responses. You get flexible development. So I mean, sure enough, if you really wanted to, you could do all your coding in the portal, and you know, you could live a miserable life because I cannot imagine actually writing code in the portal, but you could. But you know, Visual Studio, Visual Code, you know, you got the CLI tools, so you can use a regular notepad or what have you, right? Yeah. Also support for, you know, GitHub, Visual Studio Code, or Azure DevOps. I started saying Visual Studio Online, which is a really old name for that service.
Very old.
But Maven, you know, so all these different repositories, but also, you know, OneDrive, Gitbucket, you know, other Git repositories, you know, all these things are supported. And then one of the big things, you know, the different hosting options, right? So you got what we normally think about with Azure Functions, the consumption model, right? And this is the true serverless model. So you know, it shuts down when it's no longer running. You only pay for what is executing, and you know, and so forth. They have their premium model, which came out 4 or 5 years ago. Here was the idea. There was a couple things with it. So the reason why I say sort of serverless, because premium actually never goes to sleep. Right? At least one instance is always running. Right? And you pay for however many, and that's part of the whole idea with this, is you pay for whatever number you want to always be running. And it will scale up though, so hence that's a part of the service. So one, you've got that, that always, it never falls asleep. Also, it has better processors and everything, more memory. So you have those capabilities. You can do dedicated, so you can actually run this on a app service plan. I never actually met someone who's done that, but you can do that.
We do.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. You can do container apps. This is new, and I have not done this yet. But this is another option you can do. Plus a lot of other options, so the ACE options you were talking about, but if you want to spend a lot of money, you can do Azure Stack and run Azure completely in your own cloud. You can even run it on your own server, right? As a matter of fact, I mean, when we do local development, technically that's what we're doing. We're actually installing it on our own server. So lots of great options there. And the other finally big option with or feature of Azure Functions is the fact that it's open source. All right. And so why do I list this as a feature? Well, there's the obvious, right? It's open source. You can see the source. You can see everything. But one, well, you would think this also means you can see what Microsoft's doing. No, because Microsoft actually does private repo, or they fork it off to private repos and then put it back in. So you do actually see everything they've done, just usually after they've done it, because they do need competitive advantages. But I will say this: when you need support, this is usually better than Microsoft support. Put an issue now. Obviously not for stupid stuff, because they're going to tell you open up a support ticket. But if you're having something really weird happen, that's probably an issue with Azure Functions, that team responds to it really, really well. So it's I highly recommend looking at when you get the really weird stuff. All right, so lots of benefits. Trying to remember how I put these slides, yeah, now I remember. Okay, but I want to go back to the hosting options. So we talked about these hosting options. Well, even with all these, we needed another one because Microsoft can't stop, and that's where you get this flex consumption. So I first heard about flex consumption last year, and I was super excited by it. And and then it's just even gotten more better. So I'm really excited about it. So I mean, it is in private preview, so it's not in it's not GA yet. So I have that big caveat. You can use it. Anyone is. I said private preview. It's public preview. So anyone can use it. It is technically not supported for production, although it is production ready.
What is it? What sets it apart? I guess consumption.
That's what we're going to be talking about. Oh, awesome. Yes. So before I actually talk about that, I want to talk about Project Legion, because this is what makes flex consumption possible. It also makes some other things really possible. So a couple of years ago, Microsoft realized that they were coming up to some boundaries, that they were where limitations were happening. So how can we handle this? How can we have services that can burst from 0 to thousands of instances instantaneous, right? Because the old, I mean, still the way of doing it, but the consumption model, it can burst to thousands of instances, but it takes a long time. And it takes 10 minutes, right? But still, it takes time. Right? And you've got cold start issues and so forth. So here's what we got Project Legion. So here, lots of really lofty design principles. They are already meeting all these design principles, even as tough as some of these are. Again, one of the interests of the must burst to thousands of instances. Operate at growing scale. Some really interesting things that they're doing here. Uses some pretty hefty services, so Cosmos DB. So again, my whole joke with Cosmos, everyone asks me, well, what happens if my Cosmos database goes down? Like, you're not worried about your Cosmos database went down because Azure went down, because Azure runs on Cosmos. So does Office 365 and Xbox Live and all these great services. So, you're on the top of that. You're on the ACE environment and so forth. But one of the big things they've done is add some more APIs. That is for them, right? But you look at stuff they're doing with the Kubernetes, so that they can spin up Kubernetes their way. Right, because so the whole secret about Azure Functions, it's just Docker, right? I mean, really down to its containers that they spin up, right? And then lots of other features, so like the startup boost, right? The whole idea of getting it to start up faster, right? Because sure enough, AWS was eating Microsoft lunch. You know, I mean, I've been impressed with how quickly AWS does spin up. It is impressive. Microsoft has pretty much caught up with that. And then, you know, I find it funny, the over provisioning of CPUs, they were already over provisioning, and now they even do more so. Right? You know, the whole idea that, you know, they provision quicker than you really would think they would do. So, as far as in action, so the first one that got to use it was container apps, because it was when they were building those container apps, they were saying, hey, we need, you know, some more capability. So there was that. Like I say, Azure Functions is now using it. And then the interesting one, the dynamic session. So this is a whole way to run unsafe code, you know, in the cloud. And because this is 2024, you have to bring up AI. It's actually how Copilot runs, is in these dynamic sessions. Right? So Project Legion actually, you know, helps Microsoft talk about more about AI. So, all right, so that's Legion. And like I said, I just want to spend a moment on that because we don't usually hear about these you know, behind the scenes projects. But so let's get more into flex consumption. So like I said, first caveat, it is preview. It just went to preview. So at build, so, you know, a couple weeks ago, probably will be in preview until Ignite in November. There's no set, you know, I mean, even NDA, there's not, you know, information about that, but we all know that's Microsoft, you know, is very predictable. You know, they target everything at build and Ignite because, you know, it's big marketing times. And sure enough, if you look how far they are, that timing makes sense. So what are we talking about with flex consumption? Well, first off, like I say, one of the biggest issues we have in serverless is cold starts. So, and for those who are not familiar with cold starts, what I'm talking about, the idea, again, like I say, functions of service, not just Azure, but any function of service. The idea is it scales all the way back to zero. Well, when it gets the next call, well, it has to spin that back up. It's not running. So, you know, that can take time. And a .NET app can take 2 to 20 seconds. I've seen some take even longer. And that's not completely Microsoft's fault. A lot of times that's your fault because you put too much stuff in your Azure function, but you know, it's still, it's a pain, right? It's things we have to live with. And so Microsoft's done some work with this. And sure enough, so if you look at today, you know, like I say, you got the premium functions, which have their always ready. So like I said, it never actually goes to zero, right? It scales down to 1 or minimum 1. You specify how much. Like I say, in consumption functions, you wait. That's what we currently do. Actually, the trick I've learned that you can do sometimes is you'll have another Azure function that's running a timer trigger that every 10 to 15 minutes calls your other function to keep it awake. And about 80% of the times that works. Doesn't always work. I mean, if it works, it works. It's not like it just all of a sudden stops. But it's not consistent, especially for non-HTTP triggers. But with flex consumption, you can now optionally have always ready. And that's one of the great things about this, right? So premium, you have to have a service always running. With flex consumption, I can do it optionally, right? So I can say I want this or I don't want this. And obviously, if I do it, you pay for it, right? I mean, it's part of what you pay for. And again, you can turn it off and on. So you could, you know, you could set automated jobs. So maybe you only run maybe 5 days a week you want always ready, but not during the weekend or what, you know, whatever you know. That's up to you.
You set it on a schedule though? Could you say I want it always ready?
So
Business hours option.
it's Azure doesn't actually have that built in, but you could easily script that. Sure. So, and sure enough, here's an example of always ready. So we can see in this example, they've got 2 instances running, you know, always running, and you see the on-demand scale, right? So, and sure enough, what happens, even when the call comes in, on-demand scales will, you know, it will scale up another one. It just first goes to those always ready until the on-demand ones are ready to go. All right. And the thing about pricing, yeah, you're paying for those always ready, but you're not paying extra because it's spun up an on-demand. You're only paying for that always ready. But rephrase it, are paying for the execution time, but it's not a different charge. It's you normally pay. All right, the next one, and to me, this is a big one, especially where I'm at right now. Virtual network support. So prior to flex consumption, if you needed VNet support, if you needed to summon, if you needed extra security in your cloud and put things behind a virtual network, or like in my example, you need to connect back to an on-prem data center, you could not do that with consumption. You had to go to premium, right? Which means I have to minimum pay $155 a month, even if my service, runs a couple $100,000 a month, which is nowhere near $155. Now we have the support, and the great part is that we're not paying anything extra for this, right? So you can do your inbound connections, you have your VNet integration, you can even do the hybrid connections if you're Windows only. I don't know anything about that part per se. I'm not a networking guy. I set it up for work, and I'm just like, okay, you tell me what I'm supposed to do. Somehow get it to work. But I'm really excited about this. I work for an employer. We're an employee-owned company. And so money we save actually helps our stock price. So, to us, the fact that we're going to be able to save a couple $1,000s a year, that's awesome. Some other big things. So memory choice. So with consumption, you actually don't pick your memory, right? So you pay for the amount of memory that gets used by your Azure Functions. And it's whatever gets used, right? With flex, premium, you pick your memory choices, but also with flex consumption, you pick your memory choices. And this one's not optional. You have to pick your memory choices. So as of today, it's you either pick 2048 or 4096 megabytes. Why 2048 instead of saying 2 gig and 4 gig? I don't know. But everywhere in the documentation, that's the way how they list it. There must be some reason why they list out the numbers. There are more options coming. I was actually surprised because in the private preview we had 512, and that's not available. But the documentation still lists 512, so it's coming. And they promise they're going to have more, right? Because I mean, these are obviously two pretty. Now they do say most everyone 2048 is going to be the number you want, but again, you have these options. And one of the important parts with this is this really dictates how much you're going to be paying. Part of how you're going to be paying for the Azure Functions. So it's definitely something to consider. All right. So like I said, the default is 2048. And the other nice part is I can change my memory instant at any time. Again, nothing in the portal that says at 5 o'clock shut it down to this amount, but I could script that. That would be easy enough to do. Yeah, and then the other big thing, more memory means more can be done, right? The more memory I have, for example, number one, a bigger Azure function that's doing more stuff, or running more Azure functions in the same instance. I mean, that's one of the things you would think about this with that. But the next part is your per instance concurrency. So the idea that I can actually decide how many Azure functions will run within an Azure function instance. And I think, well, why would I worry about this? Well, again, think about that whole memory thing, right? I could partially decide, well, I want to run this many, or we'll say you can't do this in flex consumption, but I've actually had it in consumption right now. I can set that I only have one instance ever run. And believe it or not, I've actually have set that up before, not for a technical reason, but for a money reason. And not because it was expensive, just because the company I was working for was cheap and didn't want to pay for a database that could handle the need that needed for it. So they'd rather have people wait, and the queue just wait till it was a really interesting situation. But so I can specify this. Try to remember there we go. Because I was trying to remember what all I had on the slide. So the nice part, again, like I say, I can set my current per instance. So I can say, hey, I want this instance to run for up to 4 executions within one. Here we can see an example of this. Right. So the first example, 10 requests came in. I have a concurrency of 1. So I'm going to have 10 instances start up. Whereas the other one, I've got 5 because I set it 2. So 2 big things I think about this. One could be performance. Why you would fool with these? Honestly, most people will never fool with this, or they will because they know better, and they see in the documentation and say, "Oh, let me do that." Microsoft actually does really good guessing on how to do this. But one could be you're finding you need that your service needs more memory and you want to dedicate more memory to it, or again your whole billing idea. All right. You know, I'm smarter than Microsoft. I want you to fit more in there, and I know that means that might slow it down a little bit, but I'm gonna pay less per because I want to use less memory. So that's some of the ideas here. So like I say, there are some defaults set up. Interesting, if you run Python, it's always one. I don't know why, but it is always one. Microsoft did explain to me, but I forgot. There is something with the way how Python works that they can only do one. Other languages, so again, 5.12 is in the documentation, even though it's not there right now. So 4, 16, 32. Again, you notice the pattern there, basically 128 megabytes per function is what they're figuring. And that is pretty average, right? All right, the next part, per function scaling. Now this is something new. This is something pretty cool here. So now I can also decide how it will scale my apps per function basis. And so I'm gonna, no code changes, which is another nice part. And you know, there are a couple of special cases. So what do I mean by this? So here we can see, so we got a function app, and we've got 8 functions, 8 different type of functions running within that one function app. Again, remember, we talk about Azure Functions. You have a function app which consists of 1 or more functions, you know, individual functions. Now, sure enough, in the consumption model, I would tell you don't do this. Don't mix your triggers because they scale differently. You know, an HP trigger does not scale as fast. It doesn't need to scale as fast as a service bus trigger. Normally, again, it depends on your use cases, but normally that is the case. And you normally actually stifle your service bus, your event hubs, because you can't respond to messages quick enough because Microsoft, you know, the math they're doing doesn't scale it fast enough when you mix your triggers. But now we actually have these per function scalings. Now, again, there are a couple of rules with this. So HP triggers, those are scaled together no matter what. All your HP triggers will scale at the same level. But your durable functions will also scale together. So the orchestrator and the activity, which you think about, that makes sense. You know, obviously, you know, definitely all the activities within the orchestrator, I want those all to scale because if activity picks up, it's going to pick up for all, right? But my other ones, I can actually say, hey, my service bus triggers in here, I want those to scale independently, and I can pick that scaling. So it's really nice what we do here. And then we can scale it further. So by default, you can scale up to 100 instances. You know, so if you don't change any settings, it'll scale up to 100 instances. In consumption, it's not 100. It's not the default. I think it's 40, if I remember right. But you can only scale up to 200 instances. With flex consumption, you scale up to 1,000 currently, and that will increase. When it will increase, not this year. I'll tell you that much, because there are a couple of limitations to that. But I mean, think about, you know, again, the fact that I can have 1,000 instances of my Azure function, and again, that could be handling more than one request each, right? And I will say that 1,000 there, you can open up a ticket, and if you have a justifiable reason, Microsoft will give you more. They'll charge you more too. And then, you know, obviously or not obviously, but the lowest you can go is 40. Again, I don't know where that number comes from. That is one thing that is different from, because in regular consumption, I can scale down to 1. Because like I said, that situation where that whole database I had to keep. Now, there's one big limitation here currently. So you're capped at 512 gigs of total memory per region per subscription. So not just per function app. This is for the whole subscription for the whole region. So here's the one thing to think about that. So 1,000 instances, right? Capped at 512 means I can't actually run 1,000 4 gigabyte instances. Right? So you know, as a matter of fact, you can only run, I think it's 250 2048. Right. So when they say 1,000 instances, they're meaning 1,512 megabytes is what that number does. Like I say, that will change. I don't know when. There is some technical reasons for that number. But again, right there in the documentation, they tell you, if you have a need to go more, open up support tickets and then in those times. But to talk about scalability, to see, here's a prime example. So this is GitHub that was doing a test with this. This is just prior to them switching to the public preview, where they were running, it was like a 1.7, 1.8 million transactions per second. That's pretty darn cool, right? Again, Humana, you all probably run quite a bit, but even here at Humana, that's a lot. That's a lot.
It's not very, we don't want that.
Yeah, but GitHub does, and you can see what they can do with this, right? So again, I talk about how this is all private preview and all this stuff. GitHub's already using this and has been for a while now. So actions are already starting to use flex consumption. All right, a couple other big benefits here. So Azure load testing and integration. So this is really interesting. I have not had a chance to play with this yet, but there is now a tab in the portal, to do load testing on your things. And what they just announced at Build, I mean, even to the MVPs, they just announced this. They're working on the ability to run load test and then figure out how to tune your Azure function based upon the results you load test. I think that's awesome. Because that's always the hardest part. Exactly. All these things we could set, but we're still guessing how to do them. Right now, Microsoft's actually giving us the tools. So like I said, I haven't played with it yet. I need some time to deal with that. A couple other features. And here I can never say this word, but open telemetry. I can't say the word, but you all can read it. You can opt into that, right? So another way to get your logs. And then long execution times. So I talked about at the beginning, functions as a service are supposed to be short. But of course, we all have exceptions. We need things to run longer. So a consumption app by default can only run for 5 minutes, and the max you ever run it for is 10 minutes. Premium app can run longer. So technically, there is no can run forever. Although you're probably doing it wrong if it's running forever. But you do have these long execution times. I would still say I would be careful with that, and I would probably want to look at durable functions first, and that type of stuff. Because still some weird things. Even I would say the consumptions, once they get over 5 minutes, they do some funky things because memory allocation gets a little bit messy, and I wouldn't trust it. All right, so we've been talking about a lot of great benefits. One thing we haven't talked about is pricing. And again, like I mentioned, I work for a company where when I save the company money, that directly impacts me. Right? It's actually pretty cool. I just started the company, like I said, 6 months ago. I was looking up. I was like, if I could stay there for 10 years, which is about how much longer I've got left in my career, I will have a very nice nest egg just from this one company. Because our stock is like $1,200 a share. It's pretty nice. But pricing, right? So pricing is important. So now the way how pricing works, and this is the way how consumption works, you got your on demand, right? So this is what you use, and the idea is it's 2 different elements there. I'll talk about that here in a moment, but you basically pay for your gigabyte seconds, so how much memory over how much time you're using, and the number of executions you're using. And then you have your always ready. This is where this splinters off from regular consumption. Again, always ready is optional, so you don't have to run these, right? You don't have to do always ready if it doesn't make sense, right? I can tell you, at Jasper, always ready probably won't make sense for anything we do. At least so far, right? So we probably won't do always ready. But so pricing. So the first 2 lines are exactly the same for consumption maps, right? So 0.0000, I think I said enough zeros, $16 per gigabyte second. And now here's where it does differentiate. On the regular consumption, it's 400,000 free a month, and that is per subscription, not per app. Whereas in flex consumption, it's only 100,000. Again, you got to pay for that speed somewhere. And in your on-demand, you pay per million executions. You only get 250,000 free, whereas in regular consumption, you get 1 million free. And you still will get, if you mix regular consumption and flux consumption, you'll get 1 million regular consumption and 250,000 flux consumption. And again, you're paying for that speed is what you're paying for, right? I mean, it does cost Microsoft more money. But then you have your always ready baseline prices. So you're always ready, again, a whole bunch of zeros. And that's for however long you're running, right? Whether you have things that are on demand, they're started up, you're still paying for the always ready. Always ready, you're paying for the whole time you've got it turned on. And then I can admit, and I've got some questions out to the Microsoft team. I'm still trying to figure exactly the always ready execution time. So I'm trying to figure out, does that mean for how long it takes to spin up the on-demands, however number of requests? I'm still trying to figure that out exactly because the documentation doesn't say anything about it. And I think that's what it means, but I haven't got clarification. But you got those because I'm trying to figure out how would you ever get 1 million executions in a month, with always ready, right? I mean, even if the service never always went right back to sleep, I mean, that'd be pretty hard to call 1 million times within a month. But so I haven't got an answer yet. It is summertime. All right. So how's this pricing work? Actually, get off the slide. I meant to check that slide out. So how's the pricing work? So let's take a normal example. 3 million executions per month. Each execution using 512. Yes, you can't do 512 today. But like I said, it's coming. But 512 is what I've always used. And then running for a second. All right. So in the consumption model, that will cost you $18. It's really simple math because I forgot. If I can see my notes, I can see the math. But it comes up to $18. It's like $17.60 for the gigabyte seconds you pay over the grant, and then 40 cents for the 2 additional million sets of transactions. All right, premium. So will cost you $155.27. Now, yes, that's a big difference. But again, if you run a more powerful Azure function, or today in production, if you need your VNet, or you need something to never go to sleep, that's what you're paying for. Right? So flex consumption. Without always ready, it'll cost you $20.60. So basically, you're going to pay a $2 premium to get that extra speed, right? And again, those cold starts are faster, and just the whole thing is just faster, and it'll burst up a whole lot quicker. So I do think it's definitely worth that little bit extra. Now, what happens if we add in the always ready? So the scenario I ran, again, I'm still trying to find out if I've got my math right. I think I do. But let's say we, again, 3 million executions, and we'll say that 1% of the executions are performed well. That's probably about right. What I came up with was $33.70. Not bad, right? Again, most of that is that always ready time, just paying for it. If I'm wrong, I'm only off by a little bit. Right? So I'm still trying to figure out that per execution, or that always ready execution cost. And then to give you an actual scenario. So we're in the middle of building, we're getting ready to deploy our first cloud application. Not my first cloud application, but Jasper's first cloud application. And one of the ones we're running there, 434,000 executions per month, right? Because it's a monthly routine, all right? And so it's going to run once a month. It runs for several hours, right? It's a set of durable functions. So it's got a good size amount. We are probably, if we were to run this, we probably would use 2048 amount of memory. And it runs for about 400 milliseconds. And we need VNet connected because it needs to connect back to our on-prem databases. Because again, we're in the middle of switching. Right? We'll never be 100% cloud, at least not in my group. And cold starts are okay, right? So we don't need always right, because I already mentioned we run during the day, and our functions, will run pretty hot during those days. Or like this one, it'll spin up. It'll take a little bit of time to spin up, but that's fine because it's back-end processing, right? So in consumption, can't do it because it doesn't support VNets. So it's not even an option. In the premium, say $155.27. Pretty expensive to do, just a monthly routine. Right? Not really that expensive, but not cheap either. Consumption, flex consumption, $4. I definitely like that $4 price better. And that's not me figuring, that is, I know that number is gonna be right. I mean, again, we're still not sure 100% on the 434 and the 400 milliseconds, because we're still trying to gauge that exactly, but it's gonna be pretty darn close. So, it's a whole lot easier for me to sell $4 than $155. That's a nice way of putting that. All right, so let's see what this all looks like. I'm doing about what I thought I said. So what I'm gonna do, pull up my notes here. And sit down. So what I want to show well, I didn't connect this one to the Wi-Fi, and I didn't think about it earlier when I was because the one page I was looking for was up, and that came just fine. Wi-Fi.
About 10 online viewers, so any questions? Feel free to ask in the chat. Make sure they get answered.
I'll wait for that to connect. I can start. So let's continue. There we go. All right. So let's go in here and there's the reason why I brought the mouse. Let's do a new project. We'll do an Azure function. And I don't care about the name. Because again, I want to show that this works with the code you've already written today, right? So hence why I'm just creating a new Azure function here. We're doing the HTTP trigger. So, typical HTTP trigger, we'll change this to say, welcome to Azure Flex Consumption. And because I don't know why, that is not a RESTful call if you allow a host to return a GET, right? So we got our function, right? So nothing out of the ordinary. So now, let me go in here. Well, I already veered off of what that's okay. So now I'm gonna open this up in the terminal. And we're gonna first we can run this locally for that first, just to, again, see that this is running, because we should test this firsthand. And of course, because I'm demoing, it's going to take longer. But again, if you haven't seen Azure Functions before, here it's running locally. Like I mentioned in the beginning, you can run these on your own machine. So, we can call this, just open up a browser and hit the right button. There we go. And we see welcome to Flex Consumption. Easy peasy. All right, so we'll close that. And now the one thing I am going to do, because I happen to know that it will always fail at this step. Open this up, and I'm going to delete my bin and object folder. This has nothing to do with Flex Consumption. This is just Azure Functions. It doesn't like when you have that in there. So back to my PowerShell. So now, let's do now let's create our Azure function. So I didn't log in. I forgot something. Just make sure. I just drew a blank when I'm supposed to type. That's not right. Account show. Yeah. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm on my right account. I'm on the account that Microsoft pays for. Always the one to use. So we're gonna create this function. So we're gonna, and I really have to look at this because I never do this.
Sure. And these guys all know the commands by heart. Right?
All right, so the first thing we want to do, so one thing I didn't talk about yet. I have other slides. So Flux consumption is not available in all regions yet. So it is limited. So first thing we want to do is we do want to look. It's more than those two. That's interesting. Wow, I don't know, maybe something's going on. Well, I don't know why it's only showing us two. Definitely should do more than that. How? That is a little bit hard to read. Command again, function app list plus assumption. Locations. That's interesting. It's in like a dozen regions. My next demo might not work very well because I have it on East US too, but we'll see how it goes. All right, so we'll use East US. Create. Doesn't really matter what I put in here. You know, I'm gonna try something here. I'm just gonna try putting East US too. Yeah. Oh, well, all I've done is create the user group or the resource group. Now we'll actually create our storage account. You know, I don't know why I didn't put this like somewhere I could just copy these. Now you get to watch me type. It's so much fun. Press. Almost got this whole command. This is the longest one. Public access false. Let me do this the right way. I should have done. Let me here. Let's just start copying the whole thing. So I'm gonna create another resource group. And we're gonna create that. Here we're creating our storage account. So again, if you're not familiar with Azure Functions, Azure Functions depends on a storage account, primarily because that's where it stores its code, but also it uses it for its marshalling and such. If you do durable functions, gets used a whole lot. Okay, there we got our storage account. Now we're gonna create our function app. And then the one thing that's different, if you actually use the command line to do this, is you notice we have this flex consumption location. Again, we're gonna see if that works with East US too. It is not working right now. Wow. Something's going wrong with that's interesting. I mean, like last night I was running through this and it works. Like I said, it's in preview and things could happen. Something's not right with flux consumption. Because that can't be right.
The .NET is complaining.
Yeah. It's saying it has to be 6. It's supposed to only support 8. Let's skip this demo. Let's go to the next demo because I'm curious the next demo. The next demo is the one, more impressive one. We're gonna see if this runs, and because what I'm doing here, I can just show them on the code. Again, preview stuff, right?
Right.
So I've got this. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So I've got this resource group, maybe too big. Now you can't see it all. So we've got things like it's in a VNet. We've got our Azure function. We've got an event hub, right? So typical scenario, right? I need an Azure function that will be an HTTP trigger function that will do something. It will. I mean, here's the code for that Azure function. So it will, takes in a body and then creates a response, but more importantly, sends a message off to an event hub. Right, is what this is doing. But all in the VNet. And again, I'm not having to do this on premium and all that great stuff. All right. So we're going to see if this works. So if we go to our test, because I can tell you right now, that is a .NET 8 and it is it's in East US 2. So we're going to run this test and we're going to see what happens here. So again, I'm running load testing. I really should have tried to do this with the built-in load tester, but I've done this one. I haven't done that one. So I kept with what I know. So I got to click run. I did click run, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, it started. It does take a moment for this to actually get started here. There we go. Oh, and what I should have done, ahead of myself, go to my function. Go to sites. Oh, there, okay, there, no, that did come up. All right, so notice that there are 2 servers online. Again, Microsoft gets over anxious, right? That was just because I went to the portal page and it starts to have 2 instances. But it's not actually doing anything, right? We don't see any transactions. But again, the important fact is there's 2 instances running right now, right? So I'm gonna split these screens so we can, once this test actually starts running, why it takes so long to actually, well, I know why, because it's spinning up the VMs to run this. Okay, while that's spinning up, keep it, again, split screen so we can see when it spins up. Here's what I was gonna try to do, right? So I was gonna try to create that function app, all right? And then I was gonna publish it, right? A couple of things I will say, you can't actually go to Visual Studio and do right-click publish right now. That is not supported yet. Again, that will come. That is normal, right? Anytime that Microsoft works on a new feature on the Azure Functions, right-click publish is like the last thing that they do. You can do the extensions in Visual Studio Code, still works, or has already been updated, I should say. And then the function app, or the function CLI will work. So I'm create that here, but then what I was going to show is just how easy it is, like add the VNet integration, right? So you literally, you create your, well, here I'm creating the VNet itself, the subnet. But then, I can easily turn on what the VNet integration just by assigning the VNet to the Azure function. Really that simple. I have a feeling that Azure's definitely having some type of issue. Whether they're reporting they're having an issue is a whole other story.
They're always delayed on that too.
Yeah. Because I've ran this test a couple times, and it's never taken this long to start up. Yeah. So, you can do that real easy here. Again, like I said, we can set the memory instance at any point in time. Right now, you only have two options, but more is coming. But again, very easy to do. And like I say, you could script this very easily if you want to run it at a certain time or whatever. Funny thing, you could use an Azure function to do a timer function to slow things down or speed it up, whatever. Same thing with your always ready, right? So here we see an example. We're saying configure always ready, and we're saying on HP red. And the other thing I didn't say earlier about the always ready is that I can also do that per function type, right? So I can say my HTTP request, I want 10 always ready. That's what this example is doing. Or more importantly, I can say, hey, my service bus, I don't want it to ever fall asleep. I want that to respond immediately. Although normally I would normally say probably you want the other way around. Because normally you can actually, it doesn't matter if it takes 4 seconds for your service bus to start back up. Just depends on what you need, right? But you have that, complete capability. And again, the concurrency, something's not right with Azure Functions. Because this test definitely should have started by now. So what I didn't get to show you was that what's interesting, because the function itself is started. Oh, look at this. It is getting requests. There we go. I just had to complain long enough. So check this out. 30 servers. That's how quickly it spun up. Went from 2 servers to 30 servers. And notice it already went back down because it's already saying, oh, I don't need as much. So that was part of what I was just trying to show how fast, and I will say this within a 60-second span will do 604,000 transactions. So also pretty cool that it was able to spin it up that quickly, run those without missing a heartbeat, even if the portal is not responding as quickly as we should. But some really cool stuff that we can do here. I'm just curious. Let's try our list again. Still just reporting those two. That is very interesting. Well, that's what you get when you do demonstrations on stuff that is new. All right. Okay, so a couple of considerations. Just a couple more slides left to go here. So not all triggers are fully supported yet. They are coming. So the 3 that are not supported at all yet right now are Kafka. I'm actually surprised they listed that because that has always been just a premium thing. We'll see if that actually ever comes. Kafka's been a rarely used one also. The one I'm a little bit disappointed, Azure SQL is not being used. We are using those. And That's a brand new trigger, you know, and then single R, which I'm surprised that one's not supported yet. There must be a technical issue there.
How does the SQL trigger work?
So basically it's using, now I'm forgetting the feature in SQL Server, but basically one that tells you when a change is happening, change tracking.
Yeah.
It's using change tracking and you change tracking.
Think about the like old SQL Server.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
feature that
There is another feature, yes. But so it's using change, maybe it is a different name. But anyway, it's tracking the changes and then in your trigger definition, you say, hey, I want to watch on this SQL server, this table. And then whenever a change happens on that table, it'll trigger the Azure function. So we're using it, like I say, we're doing migrations, all right? And we're gonna, we're using the strangler method, all right? So we're still having stuff on legacy. We're gonna have the new stuff. So when we're watching when things happen on our new database, we're then syncing it over to the legacy database. We're using.
is there can you do like a SQL query and say, when a row with these criteria are inserted in this table?
I don't think so. I think you would have to do
You
that.
can do that in your function.
Yeah, I think you have to do that in your function. And then the one that's not fully supported yet is blob. And what they mean by that is blob is not, the blob trigger is not supported. You can do it via the event grid. That's how you should be doing it anyways. The blob trigger in consumption take up to 10 minutes to trigger. Because the blob trigger actually does polling. And so it's not polling every second. It's polling about every 10 minutes. So it could, depending on, not every time it takes 10 minutes, but if it's asleep, it takes up to 10 minutes to hit. So you've got those limitations. Well, apparently, I said not all regions. Well, apparently right now it's even more restricted. Like I said, there are supposed to be more that are coming up and running. I was mentioning to Anthony on the way up. So it's funny because I was supposed to speak next month, but now since this one got scheduled, I also now speaking next week, virtually, but to Rome. Well, they even had less options taken away from them. So you do have that restriction. I mean, again, something to consider. Then not all your deployment options are there. I was talking about this a little bit. So right now I can't do Azure DevOps task. I can't do a GitHub action. And deployment slots are not supported yet. Again, these are all coming, right? And these are normal, right? Whenever Microsoft works on a new feature set like this, these are some of the last things that they work on because it's one of those things they don't want to have to redo it. Boils down to that. You have the scale limitations. So like say the lowest maximum you can have is 40, which could be a problem depending on what your needs are. And then like say the highest maximum is 1,000, although technically it's 250, right? Because you can only do 24 days your minimum set to, and so forth. And then limited support, right? So sure enough, if I was to call Microsoft and say, hey, I need to create an Azure function East US 2, they're like, well, exactly. They were like, sorry, it's a preview. We don't support you right now, right?
Trying to sell your products.
Exactly. Well, trust me, I will be sending an email, to the group tonight. All right. So finally, decisions, right? There's a lot of hosting options, right? Why would you use one over the other? Why would I use flex consumption compared to the others? But so let's look at the 5 main ones, right? It's funny, you have 5 and there's more, right? But the 5 main ones, right? So 1, your consumptions. Again, this is your true serverless. This is where you're paying it only for what you're using. And really where these become still very useful is your sporadic workloads. Sporadic is, by your definition, right? Azure defines this as, I can still be running millions upon millions of transactions a month and that be considered sporadic, right? But the point is, again, use the calculator, right? Figure out where is that cost benefit, right? But also where you're not going to have a whole lot of extra instances starting up. Because the one thing about Azure Functions is, every time I spin up another instance, there is that cost to spin it up. Now, it's not as bad as the first one, because Microsoft is progressive, right? So they do say, okay, you spun up one, you're probably going to want to spin up, you might want to spin up another one. So they actually pre-warm one, right? It's not all the way warm, but they actually build the container. But they haven't started it up yet. So that's one of the things that they do. So that's where you use consumption. Your flex consumption, again, your sporadic usage, right? You're not doing tens of millions of executions a month, per subscription, right? But you need your VNet, you need your always ready, right? That's where flex consumption really pays off, right? Because you get those capabilities. Or you need, again, that ability to burst up really, really quick, right? Like I said, we saw that, it quickly burst to 30 instances without even thinking about it. All right. And so your premium, two main reasons is I need more power, right? So 4096 is not enough, right? I actually, I have some reason that my Azure function needs a lot of memory, right? That's where premium really comes up. Or, if you need things like the VNet and you have a lot of executions, again, those tens of millions, because premium's going to eventually, it's going to equal out in price, right? You're going to see that benefit. You're dedicated. Again, usually the big reasons is, hey, we've got this app service plan we're paying for, we're hardly using it. So we could put an Azure function over there, or I need long running scenarios where durable functions don't work, right? Although I would still say, you're probably not doing it right. Or, so you're doing, in the ACE condition where you want that extra security, right? Although I would say I'd probably take a look again.
When we first started doing that, app services and app function apps didn't support VNet private endpoint. So we've got a lot of investment there that would be painful to walk back, but we definitely should be looking at that.
That's exactly where I was going. It's probably, because I understood why you were doing that, even if you didn't say that. And then container apps, like I said, I haven't fooled with this in Azure Functions. This is a pretty new feature set. To me, I think the big reasons to use this, one, you need adapter support. So you're doing like sidecars that you've written for other things. You're mixing with other container apps. That's where it would make sense. Or, another good example is where you're taking legacy code and you want to run a container and then basically have a trigger off of an Azure function. Well, then that would make sense, right? Especially as an in-between, right? Get this up there and then figure out how we want to handle it further. All right, so summary, we've been talking about flex consumption. We're talking about, a way to really scale up super quick, but still get that serverless billing, right? And again, I think it's one of the big features here. So with that, any questions? I've been rambling for an hour 20.
I had a few questions throughout the talk, but you answered kind of organically. Any questions, guys? But chat, any questions in chat? Someone made a comment about carpal tunneling protocol. Outside of that, the questions.
Well, cool. Well, so sure enough, there's my contact information. Definitely feel free to reach out. All right. I'm not going to do consulting for free, but I will answer questions.
Yeah.
And again, as the MVP, I do have connections with Microsoft. So I do, if you're having really weird problems, I could probably get you connected, better than Microsoft support will get you connected. Funny story, last company I was working for, one of the teams was having problems with Service Bus, and which I was like, well, that's really weird. And I'm like, well, let me call so and so, and they're like, well, who's so and so? Oh, he's just a friend. And so, well, why would he know anything? Well, he owns the Service Bus team. They're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, we definitely have better outcomes when we have access to the product groups.
Yeah.
Which is inconsistent. We do sometimes get those access, but the Microsoft tries to keep them behind the curtain, which for good reason. If every complaining customer got access to the product group, we'd never have any products. So, we did have one person say they had some questions about triggers, but you answered them all. So
Oh, good, good.
awesome. Well, we definitely appreciate you coming and chatting about this interesting topic. And we're going to go ahead and sign off here, folks. So thanks for stopping in virtually, and look for the next event on meetup.com.